Hey everyone, this is Jen and you're watching BPD Woman. On this channel, you will learn how to more effectively live with your borderline personality disorder, or your complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or you will learn how to more effectively manage your emotions if you consider yourself to be a highly sensitive person that has difficulty managing your emotions. My aim is to share my wisdom, experience, and knowledge after living with the disorder and working to alleviate the symptoms of my disorder for the last 20 years of being diagnosed, and prior to that, living with the disorder for 10 years, probably undiagnosed. I'm not a therapist or a counselor, but I can answer one question that most of those folks cannot, which is, what is it like to live with borderline personality disorder? And while I highly recommend and endorse seeking out a borderline personality specialist in DBT classes, all things which I've done, by the way, that I couldn't consider my success in recovery where it is without them, they are limited in their approach to explain to you what it is like to live with it and discover and experience all the nuances of things that they don't understand that you go through, but I can. And so that's an aspect that I can offer to you through this channel. I offer positive solution-based approaches to recovery. And if you are a family member or a spouse or just someone who's interested in learning about positive approaches to these disorders that I've mentioned, you are also in the right place. And there's a playlist just for you entitled Friends and Family Vids Just for You. If that all sounds good, please hit subscribe and the bell below so you never miss a beat. I produce anywhere from 3 to 5 videos each week, all something new. Let's get started. I've covered several videos on the topic of friendship, how to look for friends, how to manage friendships, red flags of friendships, how to seek out positive relationships. And I've actually just created a playlist of which you'll find this video a part of. So it's called BPD Friendships. So I'll put up a link, check that out. But I wanted to create a video today entitled, I Have No Friends, Fact, Fiction, or Fear. And I am making this video today out of a personal experience, a couple of them that I've had over the last few days. And, we all have our triggers and our metrics of success. And for me, I always found that the length of my friendships, how many friends I have been these markers of success. Other people will match up their success perhaps to how much money they make, how many houses they have, or how far they accelerate in their career. I think for me, a good measure of, maybe not good, but a measure of success that I have previously used has been friendships. And if you've watched a few of my other videos over the last few days or over the last few weeks about some emotional vlogs I did about friendships and dysregulation, then, and I'll put up a link, you will have known then one of those relationships kind of went way of the toilet. And so this friendship was not something that had been developing very long, only really over the last 2 months. But the dissolution of this relationship brought up some things for me. And one of those main things is that I play some of these tapes. Dr. Daniel Fox calls it the core content. I call it the tapes. And the tapes are just like these things that play over and over in your head that are negative. So for me, some of these negative tapes that play over and over as it relates to friendships are, oh, there goes another one. Oh, you can only keep a friend for 2 months. Same with boyfriends, then they don't want to be with you anymore. Oh, here we go again. You just suck at everything. Oh, had to open your mouth again. Like, how many more of these are you gonna ruin, right? So I don't always take full responsibility for, you can't take full responsibility for anything. Like if it's a personal interaction, like there's always half and half, right? But the dissolution of this friendship also was not something that I didn't do anything like completely destructive. I had a kind of confrontational, hard conversation with this person that she didn't want to hear. And she was, in my opinion, very much in the wrong about some things. And she didn't want to continue the conversation. So her objective and her decision was to not have me be her pet sitter anymore, and then to not be my friend. And then she blocked me. Okay. So as a 47-year-old woman, does that sound like something that's mature? I would say it's not. But if you're like me, your BPD thinking takes over, and suddenly, you are in this space of, oh, I blew another one, right? So I want to talk about that. And I got this idea for this video again today because, I've been kind of coming out of this depression over the last few days and trying to make myself feel better by like putting myself out there, making sure I'm showering, doing the dishes, taking the dog for a walk, getting sunshine, eating. And I reached out to a neighbor who I don't know very well, but we're neighbors. And I said, hey, do you want to go on a walk with me and the dog today? And she said, I'm actually getting ready to see a friend for her birthday, and then I'm kind of got to do some life stuff today. And I said, no problem, have a good day. And she said, you too. Well, my birthday's coming up in several months, and so this kind of set off this panic for me that like, oh God, where am I going to spend my birthday? Who's going to be my friend? Oh, here we go. Once again, I'm at another important holiday and I don't have anyone to celebrate it with, right? So let's dive into all of these things. I don't have any friends, fact, fiction, and fear. Let's get going. If you have BPD, then you have a lower self-esteem most likely, and you have difficulty maintaining interpersonal relationships. And that can really leave you with a sense of emptiness or shame or feeling like you don't belong, which sort of, with this label of having BPD, gives you kind of like another layer of feeling on the outs or not included. And for me, definitely feeling included is difficult. Being part of a group is difficult. And so you may take these losses of friendships or relationships or rejections, whether they're real or perceived, as dings to your self-worth. And believe me, they have been dings to my self-worth. But it's also important, I think, not to completely get bogged down in this idea that it's all your fault and that everything is just chalked up to your BPD in life, because it's not. Somebody may not like you simply because you don't get along, and your borderline could have nothing to do with it, right? Or your trauma could have nothing to do with it. So let's go over some just kind of out of order tips and thoughts that I've had on this topic. So, okay, this feeling that I don't have any friends. Okay, so this is what I've been thinking a lot today, and it's come up in my life pretty consistently. This idea that I don't have any friends. Okay. Is that true? I go around walking around thinking, okay, I don't have any friends. And then, the other day I was talking to a client and we were just kind of talking like, she's in a bad spot, like her aunt is getting ready to pass away, and, just the stress of the pandemic on all of us. And I had mentioned something about how I was feeling. And she goes, well, is there anything that I can do for you? Like, she wrote this in a text, and I was like, just be my friend. And she's like, well, I already am. So you may think that you don't have friends out there, and you'll put something out there like, oh, well, can you just be my friend? And they'll say, well, I already am. And then, well, there you go. Someone's been your friend and you didn't know it all along. So it's important to realize that your perceptions of who may not be there for you could be incorrect. Let's go to the next insight. A second insight I have that kind of relates to this first insight of I don't have any friends is, what is your definition of a friend, right? Do you have a very high definition of a friend? Is your neighbor your friend? Do you consider your coworkers your friend? Or do they fall into categories like acquaintances or colleagues or coworkers? I have the kitty here. Yeah, you're so cute when you just like going off to sleep and not murdering me. Do you have an expectation like I have had that like, well, if you're my friend, then you must be there and want to hang out with me anytime that I want, and that you must be present at every holiday and every birthday, and you must reach out to me. And so is your expectation of your friend realistic or not, right? Because they may think of you as a friend, but have a different level of expectation than you do. And so by default, you're sort of telling yourself, well, I don't have all of these friends, when in fact you do. So evaluating exactly what this definition of a friend is to you may or may not be realistic. Okay, we all can't be there, try not to latch onto someone as a favorite person whenever possible. So that's my insight number 2. When people let you down, okay, this is insight number 3. When people let you down, do you see that as a betrayal of the friendship? So for instance, today when I asked my friend if she wanted to take a walk outside with me, which, it would have been nice. It would have been boost to my self-esteem to be able to, talk to someone else and have this validation that someone else wanted to spend time with me, which, by the way, she did reply back right away, right? And she did tell me she wasn't able. If she wasn't truly interested in keeping any kind of connection, or, my feelings were important to her, she wouldn't have replied probably at all. So just keep this in mind. Even though she wasn't able to hang out today, it doesn't mean that she's not my friend. And check out my video on object constancy where I talk more about this idea of object constancy. Somebody's there even when they're not physically there. So if you're interpreting and sort of ending friendships off of unrealistic expectations when they let you down, and I know that it feels letting down, like I felt let down today, but I don't take it as a betrayal of the friendship, right? So in order to keep the friendship, I don't say something like, oh, well, then you're just never there for me. Oh, well, then why do I even try? I'm not going to bother texting you next time for a walk. Those type of things work against me for what my goals are. So keep in mind that people are human and they're not always going to be there, and they could be dealing with their own stuff or have other appointments or have 2 jobs to work. So that's insight number 3. Let's take off onto insight number 4. It's hard to take a lot of data and not see it as confirmation of who you are, what your self-worth is. I mean, I've talked about confirmation bias a lot, and confirmation bias is essentially this idea that the things you see, you use that as data and reinforce your interpretations of life. So if you lose a job, if you lose a friend, if you don't get a client, or if something doesn't work out your way, you may use that as a confirmation that, see, I'm a piece of shit. I can't ever get anything right. So it's useful then to look at a numbers game. So for me, I've had a few friends that have come out of me developing clients, and I'm going to sort of talk about this in a minute about boundaries. And because the friendships kind of soured, in turn, the client relationship soured. And so it's easy for me to think, oh, well, now, 2 or 3 people don't want to hire me anymore because the friendship turned sour. So look, I blow every relationship. I blow every client interaction. Well, today I went over to my Google review page for my business, and I still have like 19 5-star reviews, and those are just the people that have left reviews. I have, more clients than that still hire me, but just haven't left a review. Okay, well, the 2 people who don't want to be my friends anymore still have left their 5-star reviews up. Okay, one of them took them down, but that's her bullshit, not mine. But 2 out of 19, right? So 2 out of 20, right? So we're talking 5%. We're talking 5% of people that don't want to be my friend or won't like me. But guess what? The other 95% just like me just fine. So it can be helpful to sort of put that things in perspective. And for me, when it's in black and white, like a review and, it's numbers, that's easy for me. Okay? So that's my 5th insight. Let's go on to the next. So my 5th insight here is, are you sure they don't like you? Are you sure? I can't tell you how many times that I think that a relationship's been doomed or over, or people don't like me because that's just how I have felt, or I haven't heard from them, or I felt like they've betrayed me. And then I realized that they just weren't talking to me because of their own stuff, or, you know, they were really stressed out, or they had a lot going on, or they were really depressed themselves, right? You know, you're not the only one who suffers from depression, right? You're not the only one who suffers from a stressful workload. You're not the only one who sometimes wants to just come home and veg out. And so, are you sure that you're not using a cognitive distortion like personalization, where in personalization is a distortion where you think that something doesn't go right and the direct result of that thing not going right is you. So for instance, you don't hear back from someone, so you automatically think, well, it's because I'm a bad person and they don't like me. It could be 100 things. They're busy, they're hanging out with someone else, they're not allowed to have their phone at work, etc. So these are sort of like the initial 5 insights, and now I sort of would like to talk about some tips on how to deal with these. So let's go into those. Okay, so I've talked about some of these insights, but I'm still feeling lonely. So now I'd like to answer and look at some questions about, okay, thank you, you know, you've told me about these insights, but I still feel lonely. All right, so let's get into it. So there was a study not too long ago, and this study essentially looked at the way people with borderline personality disorder interpreted friendships compared with their accessibility to friendships, their connections with friendships, and then compared that to people in similar situations with the same amount of connections and the same type of friendships that did not have a personality disorder. And what they found is that people with BPD, so we'll call them the A group, and people without BPD, we'll call them the B group, had the same amount of friends, the same types of social interactions, so neighbors, grocery store interactions, you know, friends. And they had it was almost identical in nature, but the difference was that group A felt less lonely, felt more lonely, and they felt like they had less friends. And the explanation of this study was that people with borderline didn't have less access to friends or less people around them. The difference was in how they were able to use their skills to reach out and connect with people. So if things like fear or depression or anxiety keep you from texting someone or asking them, do you want to come on a walk with me, then in turn, you are going to feel more lonely. You're going to be waiting for them to reach out to you first, right? You may see 10 people, you know, a person in group A may see 10 people out on a walk with their dog, and group B may see 10 people, the same 10 people out on a walk with their dog, but the study showed that people in group B were more likely to engage or say hello rather than group A. So it may not be that you don't have enough friends at your disposal. It may just be you don't have enough social skills to put yourself out there and interact and try to develop these friendships. So that's number one. Think if you can find opportunities to connect with people. So if you have a dog and you're out for a walk and you see another dog, hey, how are you? What kind of dog is that? It doesn't mean you're going to end up pen pals or best friends, but it does help build this confidence of interacting with people and putting yourself out there to be vulnerable enough to make them. So that's number one. Number two, let's go. Well, hey, Jen, that study's really interesting, but I'm still feeling lonely. I feel you. And another reason why you're still feeling lonely is this fucking pandemic. You know, this has been a low week for me, you know. It's been hard to do much more than the basics. It's been hard to get up and do my second job. It's been hard to do a lot of things. And the loneliness is compounded by the never-ending, when is this pandemic going to end? And if you're super careful about your interactions and you're not in a position to meet new people because you're social distancing or you're worried about getting the interaction. I mean, right now I have to put my number one precedence on my health because I'm the sole provider for my animals and for me. And so if something were to physically happen to me, there's no real backup plan. So I really can't risk too much social interaction for fear of getting ill and then, you know, having added financial stress, right? It's worth it to me to be more alone right now. So this pandemic certainly compounds that, especially if you're alone, and especially if you are, especially if you're alone, and especially if, you don't have extended family, and especially if you don't have a support network already in place, like a extended family, which for me, I don't. So this is another thing to examine. You may be able to say hello to people out on the street, but you may not be able to take it much further than that, right? Like, you're probably not inviting them out right now. Now, of course, when the weather gets a bit warmer in the next 2 months or so, there'll be more opportunities for that. But still, if you're like me, you're edging on the basis of caution. And it's important here that if that is more important to you, then to honor that basis of caution, because if you start to feel more lonely, which I have, and you give into these closer physical interactions and then you become sick, you're probably going to feel a sense of shame and resentment. At least I know I would, in the event that you did develop COVID. So that's tip number 2. So let's go to tip number 3. Here we go. Tip number 3 is essentially, are you being fair enough to people to get back to you in time? So my suggestion is, try to give people a minimum of 24 hours to get back to you. Obviously the phone can be a super anxious thing to have in your pocket, and especially when somebody can see your text right away or get back to you right away. And so if you are waiting for them and looking and they're not getting back to you, and they don't reply in a timeline that you find fast enough, then you may risk this friendship or developing friendship because you're worried about why they're not getting back to you. So make sure that you are giving an equitable amount of time, so 24, 36 hours for someone to get back to you. That's tip number 3. Tip number 4, here it comes. So tip number 4 is, are you choosing people that give to you as much as you give to them? What do I mean? Well, if you are like me, you have a lot of empathy, you have a lot of giving time, you want to make people feel at ease, you want to develop good friendships. And this can sometimes lead to more output from you than you're getting back in. And so it's a bit easier for me nowadays to recognize, okay, you know what? I'm putting in way more than I'm getting back. I recognize the signs earlier, and so I stop giving as much, or I wait for their output to catch up, right? Some people call this love bombing. Some people call this, not obsession, but like adornment maybe, or infatuation perhaps with a new person, and so you want to give them everything up front. Hold back on that. You're going to want to feel like that, right? Because you are a giving person and you are a warm person, but also you want to make sure that you're giving the other person enough time to feel like they're having healthy boundaries and that they're able to catch up as well. So that's my 4th tip. Choose people that are giving to you as much as you're giving to them. All right, let's go to number 5. When friendships do happen, sometimes, and for me, probably more than not, the friendships will break up. And so, again, I often try, I focus in on, oh, well, there was 1, that was 2, and that was 3. And I'll start adding these up. And again, maybe this is part of the confirmation bias and the personalization distortion that I talked about just a minute ago. But that, again, I'm seeing all of these as personal attacks on my own worth when they fall apart. Now, sometimes, I get to a place with someone where I can't take it anymore, right? Or I can't, or I feel like I'm being abused, or I feel like I'm being exploited, right? And then I do say something and it blows up. Well, that's quite a different thing than if everything was always going hunky-dory and there was an equitable distribution of friendship. And then out of the blue one day, I just messed it up completely, But it's hard for me to distinguish that, and it's like I feel like I've left in my wake a bunch of friendship carnage. And it's like, you know, some people say, oh yeah, this is my friend that I've known from college, or this is my friend from 10 years ago. I don't really have that, you know. I just don't. And it can be really depressing. But I'm gonna give you some kind of cheerleading tips here to sort of wave you off of that. So let's get into the next one. If you are continuing to find friendships in the same ways, or you're finding people of the same cloth, so people that may take more than they give, or people that may be emotionally inappropriate, or, you know, they're very hot and cold, which, by the way, are all things that I have put out there as someone with BPD, and you might as well. So I'm not passing a judgment here. I'm just saying that, you know, that might just not be a healthy situation. To reconsider your tactics and your friend pool of how you are making friends. So the people that I have, I would say I have made friends, several friends, off of business interactions. And then the business interaction is just going fine. You know, I've never had anyone critique my work, but the personal aspect gets into deep, or I get to know a client a little bit more, and then we become friends, and then suddenly something goes wrong, or there's an argument, and now I've fucked up the friendship, or they fucked up the friendship, and by in turn the client relationship also goes away of the toilet. So because of this, because I'm pulling friends out of the client pool, and then I find out I don't really like these people as friends, I mean, fine if they're clients, but I don't like them really as friends, then what tends to happen is now I've lost a friend and I've lost a client, which is like, then it's a double whammy to my self-esteem. Oh, see, you're not good enough as a friend, and also you're not a very good business owner because, you know, you've fucked up this relationship. And that's happened to me several times. And so for me, I feel like, okay, people like get along with me really quick, and then it's like going really well, and then it kind of blows up. Well, I can't take all the relationship responsibility for that, although I do seem to be involved in a lot of these. And again, that doesn't make me feel good. So now my new rule that I'm really gonna have to get really tough on is that no friends, no clients interaction, right? So if you're a client, you're a client, and I can no longer become friends with people I do business with, because I've just learned too many times that it just doesn't work out. And so for you, if you are using a tactic and getting friends that's not working, so if you're using just your work colleagues, or you're just pulling from the same friend group, you know, try to think of different ways to meet people that don't necessarily have to do with your business, okay? If a friendship does go south, think if they were a good friend match to begin with. So that means a few things. You're not going to know everything about someone in a month or two, right? But you are going to, by month 2 or 3, start getting a pretty good idea of who they are based on your interactions with them about their politics, or, you know, what they believe, or some of their quirks, or, you know, their own mental health issues. And you're going to have to find out if that gels with who you are. And maybe I'm being too picky, but maybe some people aren't being picky enough. And, you know, what a friend definition means to me is pretty different than what a colleague or an acquaintance might be, right? So one of the recent friends that was a client that kind of went by way of the toilet was someone who over time had just really, like, hi sweetie, hello, here's my real best friend right here. Over time, I was like, her thoughts were just too extreme. I didn't agree with them. They lacked a lot of sense. And then, like, she just did a lot of things in opposition to her beliefs, and I don't like that. You know, I find that really hard to get down with. So are you choosing people that are really worth your time? and that align with who you are and what you want to be. And then on top of that, examine, once this relationship is over, were they good friends to you anyways? So what does that mean? Well, in one of my last conversations with this person, we hadn't talked on the phone in like over a week, and she knew I'd been having a rough couple of days, and we were texting over something that was more appropriate to clear up over a phone rather than get bogged down in texts. And I said, hey, can I call you? Can I just take 5-10 minutes? And she's like, oh, well, I'm on a webinar. And I'm like, okay, well then after the webinar. And she's like, I really need the rest of the night for myself. It was only like 5 o'clock. So it wasn't, hi baby. It wasn't like it was like 1 a.m., right? So I said, you don't have 5 minutes after your webinar? And she goes, maybe tomorrow. Does that sound like a good friend? I don't know. I had a pretty strong emotional reaction to that. So if that's really a good friend, I think that they would get on the phone with you for 5 minutes. Now, maybe she can't get on the phone because of her own mental health issues or her own anxieties, which I understand theoretically, but if that's getting in the way of you being able to communicate or be a good friend, then that becomes a problematic situation, no? So that's one insight to help you feel better if it goes by the wayside. All right, so I'm still feeling lonely. I don't have a lot of friends and things aren't going really well for me. So what else can I do? Okay, thank you. Well, my tip number 1 is you're looking at her, which is get a dog and a cat, and I have another cat. It seems cliche, but the saying man's best friend didn't just develop out of thin air. Having a dog, especially this dog who's really emotional and very sensitive and is by my side a lot of the time, as you can see, really does give me a sense of comfort and bonding and a sense of responsibility to her, that I have to take care of her. She's here. Of course, she's not a person. A dog cannot replace a person and what they can do for you, but a dog is also not judgmental. A dog loves me for me, and obviously I give her food. But look, she doesn't need food right now. She's just simply being attached and loving to me. And so if you're finding yourself a bit lonely, it's not lonely to get a dog. So, okay, that's my first insight right there. All right. Okay. In these times of feeling lonely or that you don't have enough friends, another thing that you can do is really, again, I drive this home, is self-partner, becoming your own friend, relying on yourself, getting to know who you are and what you want, what makes you feel fulfilled. You could have 100 people in a room and still feel lonely. How you're going to not feel empty? Okay, thank you. How you're not going to feel empty comes from inside. And so observe and understand where that's taking place, because a friend will not put that in there for you. So that's insight number 2. And in addition to that, think about the things that are making you feel lonely, and then try to feel that within yourself. Okay, insight number 3, let's go. It's a tough one, but be okay with being alone. That's really difficult, I know. But you know what? I spent Christmas alone and it was very relaxing. I may be spending my birthday alone in a few months. There's ways that I can feel fulfilled and good about doing that. It doesn't mean I'm a loser. I've had birthday parties surrounded by 30 people and I have felt really alone, or that people really didn't like me, or why were they there? So it's okay being alone, and learn to be alone. Learn to do things that make you fulfilled, because in doing so, not only will you feel a greater sense of mastery and self-esteem, but you'll also be less likely to choose people to be in your life out of a desperate mind frame. All right, let's go to the next tip. If you're still feeling lonely and you're looking for more friends, think on this question: do I like them? Think more on that question, do I like them, rather than focusing on, do they like me? Make it more important that you like them than worrying about if they like you. That's a luxury you can give yourself, okay? Let's go to the next tip. Examine how your interactions with other people may be turning them away, and specifically look at your borderline behaviors that may be contributing. I've lost a lot of friends, and maybe they weren't like true friends to begin with. Maybe they were just more acquaintances, but that does make me feel bad, and it makes me feel like a failure in that regard. It makes me feel like, well, why can't I keep all these friends? Like, surely, I must be doing something. Like, I'm a big common denominator in this situation. And the thing to consider here is that you may be being more argumentative. You may be feeling more dysregulated and causing fights or not seeing things very clearly. You may be making someone your favorite person, or you may be hanging out with a crowd that's not very helpful. Someone who drinks when you don't drink, someone who's not taking care of their mental health when you're fully involved in therapy, someone who doesn't share the same interests as you. You may be picking the wrong people. You may be getting very angry. You may be displaying your anger a lot. I have a whole playlist on anger. Check it out. There's plenty of things I've done in anger that I've known that have turned people away. Your demeanor may be off, and so people don't like that. Take a solid, honest inventory, which is going to be difficult, but I promise you worthwhile, and see if there are things that you can improve on yourself and your actions with other people that will help you retain and keep the solid friendships that you want. If you're feeling lonely and you're looking for other people and you've done these inventories, try not to make any decisions when you're feeling dysregulated, and definitely try not to make any decisions about starting or ending a friendship when you're dysregulated. Why? Because you're probably going to end up making some decisions that you regret, or once you thought were very helpful are no longer helpful, and instead they're very destructive. Like when you promise to go out with someone on a date because you're feeling lonely and dysregulated, and then you promise to go out with them on Sunday, and then Sunday rolls around 5 days later and you're feeling better about yourself and you're feeling regulated again, and you're like, you know what, I don't really like this person, and now I don't really want to go out with them, and now I've got to tell them that or not tell them that, whatever you choose to do, and that can bring with it its own set of complications. So to avoid some of these things, try to make decisions only when you're feeling regulated, and not decisions when you're feeling dysregulated. Another tip is to stop making these bloody comparisons. Stop. And I do it all the time. Comparing yourself to how many people other people have as friends, Like today when my neighbor was like, oh, I'm going off to my friend's birthday party, and I thought, oh, why don't I get invited to a birthday party? Where are all my friends? Blah, blah, blah. Well, how do I know what that situation is? How do I know she's not going out of a feeling of obligation? How close are they really? Maybe this is just someone she sees once every 6 months. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, they're best friends and they do everything together and they get together and they go to everyone's birthdays together, right? No, she's probably going to have a great gift. Do I really know that? No. And so it's an unfair and unequitable comparison that I really don't know anything about. So it only makes me feel bad to make those comparisons. And so my advice is try not to make those comparisons, because you really don't know what that interaction or that friendship looks like. Another thing that makes me sort of feel a bit better about my situation is when I ask people that don't have personality disorders about their friendships. And so I call this the poll. So if you're feeling really lonely and you're looking for friends and you're not sure what's going on, do the poll. And the poll is essentially you ask someone, hey, how many good, do you feel lonely? How many good friends do you think you have? Do you have a best friend? I think you would be really surprised at some of the answers people start to put out there, this idea that you may have that a bunch of other people that you know in your life have a ton of friends, it could be quite diminished from what you originally perceived. And so it's good, again, this sort of goes into that don't make comparisons, but seeing it also goes with that confirmation of numbers, so that you're seeing, okay, what do other people experience? How can I get an idea of what other metrics of what people are successful by? And you may find that people may say they have 100 friends, but maybe they only see that friend once a year. I mean, is that in line with what you had thought? So I think the numbers might be surprising to you. Finally, and before I go into some closing thoughts here, one last thing to keep in mind is that your friendships will end and it will have nothing to do with your BPD. Lots of other people out there have friendships and they don't work out. Now, yes, those with BPD, we have more unstable relationships. We have quick fire relationships that crash and burn. We make strong attachments quickly only to watch them fizzle out, which brings us a lot of disappointment and shame. But not everyone in life, even without a personality disorder or even a mental illness, keeps all of their friends. People fall apart, people grow apart, resentments grow, problems grow, bad business transactions, sour friendships. So keep in mind that you can't chalk up everything to your BPD. You have to think of the human aspect of this, and your humanity states that you're not going to like everyone and they're not all going to like you, and not all of these things are going to work out. So keep that in mind, okay? Not everything is about your BPD, all right? Okay, Jen, so you've told us what to look out for, you've told us some facts, you've told us some fiction, you've described some fears, but I still feel like a failure. And so let me give you 4 final thoughts here as we close out this video. I feel like a failure too. How about that? I feel like a failure too, and I don't always feel great about myself, and that's just a part of being human, and that's also being real with you about where I am with my BPD recovery, that not everything makes sense all of the time, and that it can be hard, and it can be especially hard right now in an emotional pandemic like this. So it has so many added aspects right now in this point of our lives where we are with this pandemic. So I want you to just keep in mind that, yes, I feel like a failure too sometimes, and it's okay. And you want to move out of that and try not to stay in that too long. How do you do that? Well, you're going to self-partner. You're going to do things that make you feel good about you. You're going to stay true to you. Do you have bills to pay? Pay them. Do you want to write on your goal board today? Write on it. Do you want to get that laundry done? Get it done. Do you want to watch a documentary you've been waiting for? Watch it. Does your dog need a walk and you know it's going to make you feel good to take her on a long walk? Take her. These are things that build your self-confidence and also get you out of this feeling that you're a failure. Okay, those are my first 2 tips. And after you're self-partnering, I want you to try again and try again and try again and keep trying. I am never going to stop trying. I'm never going to stop, even when I've told myself I'm not going to try anymore, even when I've told myself I'm going to give up, even when I've considered things like suicide. I still just don't ever give up. You got to keep trying. Try. That's all I can say. Keep going at it. Keep learning. Keep going. You may not have 10 friends, but at least you've tried 10 times, okay? And then finally, my last tip is to feel okay with being alone. Build on that. Sit with that, okay? Because when those friendships do come along, they will make you feel like they are there in a deserved manner and not out of a desperate manner. And take your time when you get to know people. Guys, I understand what it's like to feel lonely, and I understand what it's like to feel depressed. I live alone. I don't feel like I have a lot of very close friends. I don't have a lot of long-term friends. And yeah, that makes me feel some shame sometimes. And I am feeling dysregulated this week. And so what can I do instead? I can just be gentle. And that's what I've been doing. I haven't worked my second job in a week. I've slowly but surely, I've done some other things throughout the day. But you must try to be gentle, because that's what's going to ultimately help you. My name's Jen. You've been watching BPD Woman. Thanks for tuning into this extended video. Please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting below. If you have a video suggestion, you can drop me a line below, or you can email me at womanbpd, womanbpd@gmail.com. Thanks again, and until I see you next time, and whatever you do, please be effective. Bye-bye.